Hi everyone, today we're going to be making a sharpening board, and this is basically a board that just holds all my diamond stones. It also holds the honing guide, and it has a couple of stop blocks for common bevel angles that I use. And so the board looks something like this. So on here I have my honing guide that's just clipped onto a piece of scrap walnut that I cut, and I have a couple, I only have 3 angles because really I'm only really ever sharpening to a 30-degree bevel, but I put a 30, a 25, and then a 15-degree, and that's for a back bevel on a plane iron. And then on the back I have a French cleat mounted, and I did slight adjustment to the French cleat. If you can see that, I just took off the sharp part, and that's because this French cleat doubles as a way to hold this in the vise, and that sharp section would get pinched in the vise. This just prevents my board from sliding around and moving on me. Also, over here I only have a 600 grit stone, another 600 grit stone, and a 1200. I have these little holes to make the stones easy to remove and clean, and then I have this higher plate here, and this is just to make sharpening something like a marking knife or kitchen knives a lot easier, as my hand can actually get lower than the plate, and it just makes it a lot easier to sharpen things like that. Also rounded off all the corners just so I don't stab myself as I'm sharpening. Overall, I'm super excited about this board. This just makes working and sharpening so much easier when everything is in one place. You don't have to look for your honing guide or any stones. Everything is right there, super accessible and easy to use. I'm going to start off by doing a rough placement of my sharpening plates. And if you're doing this, this is just going to vary based on the type of stones you have. For me, I have diamond plates. And I also don't want to lock these into place, so I'm just going to route out recesses for these to sit in, but they're going to be removable. And the one on the corner is going to be a bit elevated, and I'm going to be able to switch that out between the 600 and the 1200. And that way it ensures that if I'm sharpening something like a knife, I can get better access to the blade without having these interfere with it. I'm also going to transfer my strop onto here and put a couple stop blocks for projection angles. To do the alignment, I'm first going to eyeball it, and then I'm going to take my square and the marking gauge to make some more precise lines. This amount from the edge looks pretty good to me. And then I think I'll do that spacing in between blocks as well. Here I'm just coming to my pencil line. I'm just doing a light pass on this side, and I'll set that same distance on this side. And from here, I'll take my block and set it right up against the line and do a light pencil mark on the front and back. And then to set the distance equally between the stones, I'll just take the measurement from the edge of the board to my first line with my compass. You could do this with just a ruler. I like to use the compass, and that's going to be my next mark. I'm also gonna make the line to the back of my plate. Make sure that that is the back, and just do a light pencil mark there as well. Now I can go ahead and line up this block with the next pencil line. Put one light mark there. And I'll repeat the process for this wider plate using the exact same spacing. So I have my lines marked out, and I know that I want to utilize stop blocks on this side of the board for projections. And I know that the furthest degree projection I want is about 15 degrees, which is going to be roughly 10 centimeters. So I'm going to calculate how much of this board I need to remove in order to make that. So about 10 centimeters is 15 degree projection on a plane iron. For me, I'd probably want my projection block somewhere here. So I'm going to mark this, the length of my board. And I'm going to go ahead and cut that on the bandsaw. I have the plates all set, and this is going to be the location of my strop. So now I'm going to set the protrusion lengths for the different degrees. The first one is going to be 105 millimeters. So in this case, I want my cut to be on the inside of the line, so I have the edge of the tooth lined up right to the edge of the pencil mark. I have all the lines cut on the table saw, and for this last plate, the line protrudes a little bit further, so I'm actually just gonna make a knife mark and cut that part out with the chisel so I don't put another saw mark through here, which would weaken where these other plates go. So I'll do a knife wall, starting off lightly at first and then heavier with each pass. And then as heavy as I want it. And I'll come in with the chisel as well. And just really sever those fibers. Now you could do all this with a router, and the reason I chose not to use a router is because if I factor in the setup time, the cleanup time, and just the noise factor, I think sometimes it's actually a little bit more pleasant to work with hand tools. And as this is plywood, the layers come off quite easily, and with little mess, that's easy to clean up. So I chose to do it with a chisel, and if someone might be watching who doesn't own a router, you can do all this with a knife and a chisel. You don't even need the table saw. That just speeds up the initial process, just to make those lines cleaner and taking out the waste a lot easier. So here I'm just marking where I'm going to have my projection blocks, and I'm using some scrap paduk that I had laying around from a cutting board I made. It's a really cool hardwood, and I thought, why not use a little bit here for some contrast? So I'm just cutting some strips, marking them with the knife, and then just chiseling out a small housing mortise. So I think one of the best things about having a dedicated sharpening board is it really ingrains sharpening as a daily routine, a daily practice. when your sharpening setup is easy to access and take off. It just makes putting away your tools sharp at the end of the day so much easier. I think one of the first things that was really hard for me to understand when I first started woodworking was how important it was to have sharp tools. I didn't really understand that you had to sharpen daily, and sometimes you had to sharpen more often than daily, a couple times a day when you're working with a plane or a chisel, if you really want to maintain that edge and just have that crisp kind of surface left behind when you're working with a chisel and a plane. So here I'm cutting an angle on a little piece of scrap that's going to hold the honing guide. A lot of times when I'm working with small pieces of wood, I reach for the hand tools just because it's a little bit safer to work with, and you don't have to risk running tiny pieces of wood like this through the table saw or a miter saw. So I'm going to put this little piece of scrap here, and this is just to keep the honing guide secured, just so it doesn't get lost. And you can see here, I've just cut the sides. From sliding. Hey everyone, if you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe, and if you didn't like it, double smash that like button. Anyway, if you have any questions, criticisms, leave it all in the comments. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on it. If you have your own sharpening board ideas, I would love to see those. Anyway, thank you for watching and have a great day.